advice that has helped them in their writing career. And, you know, we're also going to throw in advice they wish they had never heard. So let's start with with having our writers introduce themselves. And we have two writers who, two who are not here yet, who when they get here, we'll have them introduce themselves. But let's start with Jose and Elle, who are right below me on this, multiple Brady Bunch. So go ahead.
All right, I'll go first. Hi, I'm Elle. I write lesbian and bisexual science fiction romance for a traditional small press. I am represented by Naomi Davis at Bookends Literary Agency. I currently have 3 books out, with a 4th coming in 3 weeks. And my Stormfront series is going mass market paperback starting in March, meaning it will be available in physical bookstores like Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, and so forth. Yay, that's me.
I'm Jose Iriarte. I'm primarily known for my short fiction. I have stories in Lightspeed magazine, Strange Horizons, Fireside Fiction, a couple dozen other places. I am a Nebula Award finalist and a Tiptree Award long-listed person. I've got stories in some best ofs and stuff like that. And I guess that's it.
Okay. Dan?
I'm Dan Alatorre. I'm a USA Today best-selling author. I have over 40 published titles. I have a horror anthology coming out in October, a medical thriller in December, and a murder mystery in November between those two. So pretty busy.
All right. Will, please.
Hi, everyone. I'm Will Ludwigsen. You've probably seen me at Necro for a very long time. I've sold a great deal of short fiction to places like Asimov's and Weird Tales, Cemetery Dance, Nightmare, most of it kind of leaning horror and crime. Also been in Hitchcock's Mr. Magazine. I have a few collections that are available in all the usual places from the small press. I've used to teach creative writing for many years at the University of North Florida, so I've heard and given a lot of really bad advice, so I'm here to atone for my sins.
All right, and Kenny. Kenny is down there. All right.
What? Where? Ken Mitchroney. Let's see. I'm sure a lot of you know me because I've been at Necro for. How long have I been part of this group? My God. Anyway, animation live action director, just finished a few years ago working on Fata Morgana with Stephen R. Boyette, and written a lot of comic books, a lot of things in movies and television, and it's just a lot of stuff. But anyway, yeah, that's it for right now. That's good. That's all you need to know.
All right. Okay, now how the panel's going to run, I'm going to ask the panelists some questions. If you have questions for the panelists, you can either wait till we open for questions, or you can throw them in the chat and I'll read them. It's up to you. Now, so since this is the best advice I ever got, let's do the obvious question first. What is the best advice you ever got? And we'll go from the bottom up. So Kenny, you're on top.
Oh my, okay. Well, there's a couple of them, but I'll boil it down to actually something that believe it or not, Steve Boyette always said that I always thought it was a great piece of advice. Is that you come at anyone with an idea, a story, whatever, and you start blathering your script, and he's like, whoa. Why are you telling me this? And why is this necessary? Why is this story, why are you telling me this? Why is it important? Why does it merit me listening to it? As if I'm the reader, why? Why is that? And it's always a great jump off point, because it does make you think about, wait a minute. Yeah, I mean, this has a nut of an idea, but it's not a full idea at all. And this could be something that could built into another story or a piece of a story, but I don't know if it's going to carry it or not. But it's an interesting jump off point piece of advice that I always think about when I sit down and start writing. I'm like, wait a minute. Yeah, he's right. So I'll pass it on to the next.
Okay, the next would be Will.
So I went to Clarion, the 6-week writing workshop for science fiction, fantasy, and 1 or 2 horror writers that they let in by accident like me. And that was a fiasco. No, and not entirely a fiasco, but my story was one of the first ones read and critiqued by the 20 people in our class, and it was mercilessly savaged. I mean, just to the point where, and I'm one of those people, like many of you, I guess, who's probably been told throughout their entire lives, like, you're better than most people, keep on, whatever. And so you've been kind of satisfied with that gifted kid, okay, cool. And I was so embarrassed and horrified that I had been skating along with mediocrity as long as I had, that, I got very conservative in the rest of those weeks of Clarion, and I wrote, I'm going to write a story with a beginning, middle, and end. There's going to be a third-person narrator. There's going to be blah, 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 blah. And the last 2 weeks, they have like an anchor pair of people, and one of mine was Kelly Link. And when I went in and had my conference with her, she said, you are trying too hard to write like other people. She goes, you've already published stories. You're weird in your own odd way, and that's pretty much all you've got. Really, is whatever collision of things that you have. And we don't need anyone else like we have in this group. Just go do weird shit like you've been doing and just do it better. And I'm like, oh, okay. So then that's kind of that gave me, I've been reading every, fiction writing manual, all those things of how should I be doing it right. It's right when either it sells or you enjoy it or someone else enjoys it. And the more you try to be like other people, the more doomed you are to unhappiness and failure. So.
Okay. All right. Dan, what have you got? What's the best advice you were ever given?
The best advice I ever got, first let me preface it by saying where you are in your writing career, the best piece of advice you get will be different. But I would say if you're starting out, the best piece of advice I got was to join an online critique group. And the reason why is because, first of all, there are many of them out there. Many of them are free. So, a lot of them are critique to other people's stories to be able to have one of yours critique that kind of so it doesn't cost you anything really, except, the pound of flesh that you may occasionally, as Will mentioned, lose in the process. But what it'll allow you to do is not so much what you think. There was certainly a toughening of the skin that we can assume Will went through with his process. That's going to happen. But I'd rather have that happen before I publish the book than after. 500 negative reviews will put you in the abyss, okay? It's better to be working with people who can tell you this is what's wrong and here's how to fix it. Here's some suggestions, all right? So that's part of what you receive, but here's the real benefit of it. And I was recommended, I had already written some stuff, it was already selling okay, and somebody in an online Facebook authors group recommended, and I was like, what, join an online critique group, a bunch of people sitting around who don't have any talent, all telling each other how great they are. And there are some people in those groups that do that. There are other people who know nothing and come in and tell you how to do everything, and it's all bad advice. You're going to be smart enough to very quickly figure out who most of those people are. What I was able to do, the big benefit for me was I learned how to find mistakes in other people's writing, which made me more able to find them in mine. So when I said, hey, this is a POV issue, this character can't know what that character's thinking, the way you have this set up, it's not omniscient. And then when I make that mistake, it's like, Jane felt this, Bill felt that. It's like, it doesn't work. And other different people bring different things to the table. So one critique partner, you don't necessarily want to make friends, but you definitely want people you can trust and rely on to give you honest information. You have to be honest with them. There's a way to deliver the message and be nice about it so that it's benefiting the person as opposed to tearing them down. But that was what I learned. I critiqued everybody as often as I could. I did thousands of critiques over the course of a year or two. And we're talking 3,000 word submissions and up, right? So by doing that, all I was out was, this is helping me so much. It wasn't obvious at the time, but I got it very quickly. And then I was able to look at my own stuff and I would write it. And if I wrote something today, if I let it sit for a day or two without looking at it at all, and then I came back and looked at it, it was much closer to someone else had written it because I could be objective. What I thought was on the page may or may not have been there. So that would be, if you're just starting out, I would say, find an online critique group. And in that group, as you do critiques, the group I was in, and I'm not going to mention them because they don't pay me to endorse them, I was able to, after I critiqued, say I read one of Will's stories, I didn't, but let's say I did, then I would be opened up. Once I posted my critique, it would open me up to what Elizabeth said about his story and what Rob said about his story and what Jose said about. So now I'm saying, oh, this person, Elizabeth, thinks like me. She caught things I caught. Rob pointed out something I thought at the time and didn't think to say. And oh, you know, David's bringing up things I never even thought about. So now you're a sponge. You're just absorbing. And really what you're doing work on other people's stuff to improve them, but it is tenfold because every time you do it for them, you are reinforcing that skill in yourself. Your writing will become, 90 days later, it'll be so much better you won't believe it. That would be, starting out, the #1 piece of advice I could give you.
All right, thank you. Jose.
All right, so these are all fantastic answers so far. I spent the last several days stressing a little bit, trying to figure out what is the best piece of advice I've gotten. And I don't think that there is a single answer to that question because it's just little nuggets that hit you in the right place at the right time. Something that has really resonated for me a lot in the past year or so was a column by Daniel Jose Older, Writing Begins with Forgiveness. And it's basically, you know, I internalize a lot of external messages about productivity and about what should be accomplished. And, you know, should I write 1,000 words every single day? And if I don't, if I'm not writing, am I a writer and all that stuff? And I had found myself in a place where I associated the act of sitting down to write with feeling bad about myself. And therefore, shockingly, I was not being very productive. And so Daniel Jose Older writes in that column about kind of moving past that and basically every day kind of being blind to anything that came before. What are you going to accomplish right now? Don't worry about your goals. Don't worry about what you have already done. Celebrate every good thing that you do today and don't care about if it's, you know, the first time in 2 weeks or whatever.
Okay, and Elle.
Well, I think the best advice I ever got before I began writing was don't wait and don't stop. You know, a lot of people tell themselves, well, you know, I want to write this book, but I'm going to wait until my kids are grown. I'm going to wait until I retire. It's a long road, especially if you're pursuing traditional publication. It takes years and years first to hone the craft and then to, you know, get there. You know, I started writing when I married this guy over here, and we pushed each other really hard, and I queried a book and I didn't get an agent, didn't know how close I'd come because I'd gotten full requests, didn't know what that meant, had no idea. And I got so discouraged, I quit for 5 years. And I would give anything to have back those 5 years. And then as I progressed, you know, picked it up, tried again, got the agent, got the book deal. You know, a lot of people tell me that they stop writing when they're querying. And I would strongly suggest that even then, you be writing the next book while you are querying that book, because it's that hope. It's that hope that like pulls you along. So even when those rejections are coming in and slamming against that thick skin that you have built, you've got this other thing that's gonna be even better that you're working on right now. And so even if this one doesn't sell or doesn't get you that agent, this other one might. And it keeps you being able to deal with the negative and while you still have that hope for the positive. So don't wait, don't stop.
Awesome. All right. Well, we can't ask what was the best advice without asking the opposite question. Worst advice you ever got? Let's go, Dan.
It's not exactly the worst, but it's hurt me in a number of ways. And that was when I first started out, my plan was I wanted to write different genres. So if I wanted to try my hand at romance, I would write a romance story. If I wanted to try my hand at a Western, I would, you know, and not a short story, just a novel, all right? Because my thinking was, first of all, there's usually in one story, there's elements of the other genres in it. So just take for example, Star Wars, the original in '76 or whenever it came out. That's a cowboy movie set in space, but it's also a romance. It's also a thriller. There's also a mystery. So there's a lot of, and obviously there's a lot of other elements in there. I wrote a action adventure story. It had a romantic scene. Well, if I don't know how to write a romantic scene, my reader is going to go along, hit this rough patch of gravel, hate it, maybe put the book down and never pick it back up. Okay. Instead, I appealed to my friends who wrote romance, and I said, this is where the boy and girl who've been kind of pining over each other as they're getting shot at, this is where they finally get together. And it's just a sweet, innocent moment, but it has to read as good as everything else. And they helped me hone that. So I was trying a lot of different things. In that regard, I thought, here's me. If you like my stuff, here's all the different types of things that I offer. Come to this one place. What I should have done and what I was going to do was put this, if I wrote a sci-fi, put that out under some different name other than Dan Alatorre, maybe DP Torres. If I was going to write a romance, maybe that would be JH Allen, something, so that they were different, and then create different author pages for them, different Facebook author pages for them. The reason I didn't was because twofold. One, I wasn't going to write lots and lots of stories in those different genres. I was really kind of exploring around a little bit. And second was because I had a friend who said, don't do that. Have them come to your place and get their stuff there. Here's why that was bad advice. When somebody finishes any product, whatever it is, you like Lay's potato chips, you go to the store, you want to go to the potato chip aisle, find the one you just had. Oh, look, I had barbecue. They have now green onion. I'll try that because I like the other one. It's just a little over. Instead of looking through the motor oil section to try to find your potato chips and hoping you come away with something correct. So by putting all my different types of genre stories, all lumping everything together, I make it harder, have made it harder for a reader to find something that they already like. For example, these books behind me, this is the Gamma sequence. It's my most popular seller. There's 3 books in that series, but if you go to my author page, depending on which one I'm advertising that day, you might not see any of the 3 of them. Now, if I was smart and I said, for this book, go to this author page, and there's the 3 books you're looking for, that would be smart. The romance wouldn't be there. It'd be on some other page. So bad advice, certainly, how much has it affected me? Hard to say, but I know that it has made it harder for my readers to find my stuff. And let's face it, this is leisure reading. They don't have to read these things. So we shouldn't make it any harder for them to find it than we have to.
All right. Will, what's the worst piece of advice you ever got?
Once and most of you have either encountered this or will encounter this, you'll make a few good sales in short fiction and start building those and maybe get an award nomination, like I did with the Shirley Jackson, and then people will start nagging you about writing a novel. And what they'll tell you basically is that the novel is the only real marketable unit of a career. That's kind of the strange idea that's floating around. And technically that's, I guess, kind of true, but I think what that does is it drives people, number one, into all those weird productivity, self-helpy kinds of things. Like, I've got to write 1,500 words a day and all that stuff, which I don't think is all that helpful. But also, I think you need to follow that more organically, because what had happened to me was that my stories were getting longer and longer and more complex and more interesting, and I was enjoying them, and it was kind of almost an experimental Frankenstein lab. But then I stopped because I'm like, oh shit, I shouldn't be writing short fiction. I should be writing novels. And so I had to try to learn a whole other skill when frankly, I was learning that skill and I interrupted myself. And I would have organically grown into a novel like Ray Bradbury did, and all these other writers who, yep, I started with short fiction like lots of people do. And so I think that the worst advice I got, and almost all of the marketing advice I get from various people or my students ask me about, is terrible, and I think a lot of it just has to do with desperation and this strange entrepreneurial kind of illness that some people have about, this is a business, and yeah, I get it, it is kind of, but I think respect your own process and respect your own growth and development. Try to write a novel. If you get suddenly shoved back out, that's fine. Keep working on your other, I know many, many, many writing folks who were doing fabulous short stories, building great careers, but then their agent or someone told them, drop everything and write a novel. And then suddenly they are in the doldrums, you know, because they were already progressing that way and they tried to go too far too fast. So I would say trust your own development and process.
That's the process, yeah. All right, Jose, worst advice you ever got?
Any advice that has begun with some version of, this is how real authors do it, this is
Ooh,
how
yeah.
real writers do it, you know. Real writers outline, real writers don't outline, and they do it from the seat of the pants. Real writers write every single day. Real writers, you know, any advice that begins that way is just a recipe for, if you don't happen to match up exactly with that person's probably wrong, probably not universal preconceived notion, then you're just going to block yourself.
Elle?
The worst advice I ever got, and I've been very fortunate, I've had a lot of people give me fantastic advice. But early on, when I was just beginning to write novel-length work, the worst advice I ever got was, this is great, this is awesome, you're really good at this. Because then I stopped trying to get better. And you want, you know, I totally agree with Dan when he talked about having a critique group. I run a couple of them myself. But it has to be the right critique group. If you've got a group surrounding you that only tells you that you're really good and really talented and never tells you areas in which you can improve, and yes, we all need that pat on the back, we all need the gold star, but it's, you know, every once in a while you need to not hear that, because otherwise you're not going to level up. And so I spent a while in the critique group where everybody told everybody else how fantastic they were. And nobody either didn't know how to find the things that needed work or just weren't willing to say. So I would definitely say, don't listen to, if everybody's telling you you're great, you probably have something you need to work on.
All right, and Ken, what's the worst advice you've ever gotten?
Well, it's interesting. This will jump into the realm of animation, actually, as far as story and writing. And it does affect all of us. And the worst advice I ever got, we were on Toy Story 2. And I had a nice little crew of story artists. And we were writing every day. We were doing the storyboards and all that kind of stuff. And Robert McKee's book, Story, came out. And Robert McKee started doing these seminars. And everybody had to go to McKee because his story, you know, this is all this really great advice on how to do story and all this kind of stuff. And my team came back and it ruined some of the best writers I have ever worked with, because they did, all of a sudden they're plug and play writers. And then Save the Cat came out, it was that same thing. And you're sitting there, okay, well, the character has to change here. Why? Well, it's a third act. It's part of the hero's journey. Well, why? Because he's supposed to. Well, why? You know, when did you stop writing with this and start writing with this and writing with your experience? You know, that was the worst. I went in. I took about an hour's worth of the class, and I was choking on bile. I had to get out of there. I was like, yeah, you know, I'm done. I gotta go. I'll see you later. Because I've grown up with writers, I've hung around with writers, I know the process, I know what the deal is. And it goes absolutely against all the guys I know who are super successful, and they just laugh at that plug and play story stuff. Because everyone's story starts to look the same. Everyone's story starts to sound the same. And it ruins this collaborative creativity in a story room. And that's, you know, and if you're writing with another writer like I did with Steve, you can't do that. You can't plug and play it. You just can't, because you're just going to look like a hack. You know, it's just going to be the same thing over and over and over and over again. So that was very sobering, and I'm glad I didn't fall for it.
It reminds me.
I'm glad it smoothed out, because the movie came out much better because of that. There was a moment of darkness where I'm like, oh no. Yeah.
Reminds me, my first time ever going to a Romance Writers of America meeting, a local chapter. Everybody's talking about GMC, GMC, GMC. Now, I know now that GMC stands for goal, motivation, and conflict, which is what's supposed to drive your characters. But I'm sitting there as a newbie going, why is everybody talking about trucks? So yeah, I hear where you're coming from on this one. All right. Now, publishing has changed a lot over the last 10, 15, 20 years. What advice were you given early in your career that you feel no longer applies in the current publishing world? Will, I haven't gone to you first. Let's go to you.
Man, this is going to be weird to say because I have been a person who's given this advice a lot. And what I've always told my students is that almost always the absolute best way to get your book in front of other people is to pursue traditional publishing in any way that you can. And on the whole, that's probably pretty good advice. You should try that first. You should do everything that you can. And I've seen a lot of really bad self-published writers, and you see everybody in those kind of self-published writer alleys, which looks kind of like Calcutta, where people are like, please buy my book, or whatever. But I will say that, you know, things like The Martian and other stories where people have, by the sheer force of their enthusiasm, published it in some unusual way, have been reaching readers. You know, people who, you know, the lady who wrote those tweets, Guy in Your MFA, has been writing wonderful humor books. You know, Ali Broche. I mean, people who put their stuff online in some fashion or whatever. I mean, I'm still, you know, it still makes me wince, the whole, you know, well, what's your marketing plan? I mean, all that kind of stuff still kind of bothers me. But one thing I will say is that, you know, there's a lot more ways to skin a cat than the old fashioned, okay, let's write it this way, get this agent, do this kind of thing. Because, you know, and frankly, you know, it used to be that, oh yes, if I have the backing of a publisher or all these other things, everything will fall into place. Well, you know what? You're actually, it's not that much better. You know, I mean, the funny thing is that, you know, they have this myth that, well, I've made it, you know. So I would say that the one thing that I was told over and over again is, for the love of God, never do anything odd. Just always go through New York, always go through an agent in New York, always do these kinds of things. And I think that, yeah, I mean, don't go to Kinko's and print it that way and do all of that, but there are other ways. You'd be surprised.
Okay, Ken, you're laughing. What do you want to throw in?
No, I love the new formats now because you can reach, if you're good, if you're writing stories that are really good, you'll get noticed because now you can spray the internet like a cat. You can just go, you know. There is absolutely no reason not to get your stuff out there and go, hey, look at me, I'm writing this. What do you think? I was lucky with Fata Morgana because Steve has a New York agent, and it's when it was happening, when the book was happening, it was people were asking me, so you're self-publishing? Oh, are you doing it right? You know, and I'm like, no, we kind of got. Is it not the new thing to not have a New York agent? I don't know, because I was very, very lucky. I was blessed to have this happen. So, but everyone who asked thought I was, you know, like when I self-published my own comic books back when they said you can't do it. I'm like, okay, I'll make my own. The hell with you guys. I'm just excited about all this because you can get your voice out there. You can get your stories out there, and you can get noticed. And even if you don't physically publish something right up, people will get a hold of, like, wow, I love his style, or I love her flavor, and this is really good. I'm going to keep following. So there's no reason not to, but I'm just you know, poning on Will's here. But yeah, I mean, why not? Why not? Don't think that you have to go traditional now. You know, the publishing industry is a bajillion years old, and most of it is very, I mean, it takes a year to print the book, you know? I mean, like, really? It still takes a year? What is this, Mark Twain? I mean, come on. How old is, you know? You're like, oh, I wrote this 2 years ago. Well, what are you waiting for? A release date. I'm like, What? It's 2020. I just put it out there, make your money, find a better way. It's just funny, that it's very sobering to see that publishing is legitimate publishing has not gone forward with the rest of the world. So,
I mean, I do, just to tack on, because I'm worried that I've given whiskey and car keys to teenagers. There are good ways to still go the traditional route, and yes, they do get better distribution. It's easier to get into Barnes and Noble. There's lots of really good reasons to do it that way, but it's no longer the entirely horrific murder scene of, if you have to say to yourself, you know what, I really stand by this and I want to get it out there. And I know, again, that mentor of mine, Kelly Link, she's one of the greatest short story writers currently alive in our genre, and she self-published her first collection, or through her own press essentially did, and all of these places that you're like, no, I'm gonna get this out there any way I can, and it's just, it has a lot to do with what effort you put into it. So anyway, so that was my extra caveat. But yeah, you're absolutely right, Ken. Unleash the hounds.
Exactly. How honestly, you've done all this effort. How important is it to you to get this out? Or are you just doing it and going, oh, okay, well, that was fun, and walk away? If you want to do it, do it. You'll survive, and you'll do great. But you have to keep at it. It's the internet.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Dan, advice that you were given early in your career that you feel no longer applies.
Well, just to touch on what these guys said, I think most of these options aren't mutually exclusive. You've got more than one good story in you. And if you know the traditional route's going to take a couple years, you're going to spend a lot of time querying agents, man, work on your next story and self-publish or independently publish the next one. And if you can write a good short story over a weekend, do that and send that out to magazines. It's not this or that. It's kind of all of the above. The more things you open yourself to and say yes to, the more successful you're going to be if you have any talent. And if you don't have any talent, you can probably get the talent. You can work on your skills. Again, if you join a critique group, there'll be plenty of people to tell you what you need to work on, as long as you're all not around in the Mutual Admiration Society. And that's something that, if you were like I was not afraid to ask questions. I had a sales background and as a sales manager. So you're a new manager, there's lots of things you need to know, and there's always people coming in to tell you, here's how you do this, how you do that. But the biggest thing I would tell the salespeople was, if you don't know something, ask me. Yes, you'll be embarrassed, but I can't help you if I don't know. And I just took that approach. So when I started writing, I joined lots of groups, and people were talking about, what'd you say about GMC, right? I would have been the first one raising my hand and said, I'm sorry, I know this is a silly question. I don't know what GMC is. And then shame on them for using an acronym that not everybody in a lot of the room would be new, that a lot of the room wouldn't know what that was. Somebody said, you need to put a beat here instead of these dialogue tags. I'm like, okay, first, what's a dialogue tag? And second, what's a beat? Why is one bad? Why is one good? And then she gave me some examples. I was like, oh, okay, I see it. I was doing some of it, but I didn't understand what she was talking about because I didn't know the jargon. The next day I knew the jargon and I was off to the races. So I would say, avail yourself. It is the internet. There's lots of different ways to go, and they're not mutually exclusive. You have lots of good stories in you, so take advantage of them. I have a fantasy story. So let's look at traditional. The way I view traditional is there's a slot at Barnes and Noble for this type of book. If they need more of that type of book, that's what the agents are looking for to give to the publishers, to give to Barnes and Noble. If I didn't happen to write that type of book, my book's not going in that slot, but it doesn't mean there's not a slot somewhere for my book. And it may be to find a niche market through Facebook ads or Amazon ads or whatever it would be. And there's nothing, I have friends who write short stories who just constantly, every few weeks or however often, put them on their blogs. And what happens is they get a following for the short stories, and all those people who read these short stories are like, Will, wouldn't you? You should write a novel. And then she says, by the way, at the end of the blog post where the short story is, if you want to check out my books, she sells a lot of books that way. So there's, as creative as you want to be with your storytelling, you need to be equally as creative with your openness to marketing. And most authors are introverts. Most introverts don't want to go market. They don't want to be salespeople. I got news for you. Whether you traditionally publish or independently publish, you have to do a lot of that legwork regardless.
Yeah,
And
the
the
publishers
other
are
thing I'll
not
say on
doing
this
it for
is-
you anymore.
The other thing I'll put out there is this, and this is true across the board, which will make you question everything. Who's the best quarterback in the NFL, arguably, over the last couple of years? We can say Tom Brady. A lot of people say he's the best. I think we can all agree he's pretty good. But wasn't he passed over by every single team in the draft multiple times until he got picked? Yes. Stephen King got passed over by every publisher. J.K. Rowling got passed over by every publisher. Henry Ford couldn't get a loan. Can we start to see the pattern here? The people in charge don't always recognize the creative talent, but the audience does. If you work hard to get it out there, you will find your audience. And guess what? If you're writing cowboy porn, it might be a really small audience, or it might be huge, untapped. I have no idea, because I'm not into cowboy porn, I don't think.
It's actually a
you
pretty
take my
good
point-
audience.
That slipped
Find
off
your
your lips
audience, and then
pretty
you'll
quick.
love what you're doing.
All right. Jose or Elle, I'll let you pick who gets to go first. Advice you were given early in your career that you don't feel applies anymore.
I usually win. So I'm going to kind of tag off of what Dan was saying, in that, when I first started writing, the advice I was given was, how this works. I'm totally dating myself. I go back to, you go to Barnes and Noble, you buy the big old book of agents.
Big old Writer's Digest. Book of
Yes,
agents.
get
Yeah.
that. And you write your query letter, you type your query letter, and you put it in an actual envelope with a real stamp, and you send them out. And if they request your manuscript, you print the entire 360-something page manuscript, and you wrap it in rubber bands and put it in a box, and you send it out. But the key in there was that, we were told that writing could be a very, very solitary and introverted, career path. And believe it or not, most people don't. I was an incredibly shy, withdrawn, and introverted person. And so that was a big draw of writing for me, is that I could do this in the privacy of my own home, and nobody had to see me or hear me or anything else. And as times changed, I learned that advice of how this works was changing along with the times. And I had to develop my own persona and develop speaking skills and get comfortable in front of audiences and draw on, the theater background that I'd had for a while and all of those things, and start being on websites and start doing social media, because you can't, whether you're traditional or self-published, you really need to be able to do those things. And not always, but in many cases, you need to have that skill set to really get your work out there, because the publishers aren't doing it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And when I say this, just take it with a big grain of salt, because at this point, I'm subject to the exact same phenomenon that I'm going to critique in other people. When I was first trying to break in, the advice that I kept hearing from people who sold their first books in the 1980s was no agent who would represent an unpublished author is worth having. So therefore, send your books directly to the publisher, get a publishing contract, then go looking for an agent. And that's still a route that you can take, but I don't think that that's particularly good advice these days. Another thing along those lines I really thought you were going to jump on was the advice that that writing and selling short stories is an avenue into being a novelist. That it's like the journeyman work of being a novelist. Write short stories because you like to read short stories and because you like to write short stories. Not as a stepping stone onto another thing, but as an end in and of itself.
Which kind of goes back to what Will was saying earlier.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right. So let's take, we've got about 10 minutes left officially, I think. So does anybody have any questions? There's nothing in the chat. Does anybody have any questions for the panel before we go on? I've got 2 more questions before we're done. So.
Is this a question that just popped up there from LM?
Yes. Any recommendations on a place to self-publish a few copies of a book in memoriam to someone who died? Just want a few copies for the family. does anybody mind if I take this?
Sure, go ahead.
Go for it.
Lulu is very good for getting just a few copies of something if you don't want to if you don't want to publish wide, if you don't want to go out to sell everybody through barnesandnoble.com or Amazon, take a look at Lulu. It's Lulu. I don't know if anybody else has any recommendations.
No,
That's probably a
what I
really
would've
good.
thought.
That's probably a really good suggestion. That would be where I would start. I think it's low costs these days. There's not a lot of art fees and all that kind of stuff. So you're not going to drop a ton of cash to get, like she said, or he said, LM, several copies for memorial type thing. Or I'm sorry, that's not what you said, but close enough. Yeah,
And
you're not going to spend a lot of money to get them.
And
there
I
may
do
not be
remember
another way to
hearing,
get that done.
and I think I saw something in one of the channels or other. Laura, I am sorry for your loss. All right, so let's go back to my questions because nobody else has questions. Your favorite piece of advice to give to new writers, and I'm going to start with Elle because I know she teaches writing. So you first. Your
Sure.
favorite piece of advice to give to baby writers.
Yeah, my favorite piece of advice is don't chase the trends, write the books that you want to see, but a caveat on that is write the books you want to see that you're not finding. So there's not a whole lot of science fiction lesbian romance out there. I couldn't find the things that I really wanted to read when I tried to write other kinds of science fiction or other kinds of romance. I got agents, but I didn't get sales. As soon as I started writing to the specific thing that I really loved and I really wanted to see more of, I sold my first one. So, don't write to trends because the trends that you're seeing on these shelves are 2 years old. And don't try to write something that you don't feel. You might be able to do it competently, but you're probably not going to strike those emotional chords that are going to raise you to the bar. That would be my biggest advice to give to new writers.
Okay, and Will, you said you taught writing too, so let's go for you next.
Yeah, I used to tell my students that the number one reason that they were not doing as well as they thought they should be is that they were really boring, or at least their stories were. and I used to say that, I'm like, these are for entertainment, and I know you've been stretched through years and years of learning horrible, horrible things in your other English classes, and I apologize because those are my people who work with me. But you've got to remember that, number one, what lights your, what gets you going, what, gets you emotionally involved, just like you just said, Elle, and I mean, I literally have them write lists of what are the collisions of things that you absolutely adore, this video game plus this, whatever. I mean, where do these things intersect? I love true crime and I love 60s nostalgia. Okay, so what would I write or whatever, that kind of thing. But yeah, the other thing I tell them too about that is that, writing is kind of like fighting off a disease. You're going to have a lot of different symptoms. You're going to have a lot of different treatments, but they're not all going to work the same way forever. And so you have to be flexible. There'll be days where you're like, yep, I am writing like a mad fiend in this notebook by hand because I feel like Abraham Lincoln. Let's just do this thing or whatever, right? There are other days where
with a fountain pen.
Yeah, or with a fountain pen. I have one literally sitting right here, and that kind of thing. I have to write in a moleskin or whatever those things are, and that's fine. Have those little fetishes, but keep in mind that just like when the characters of Star Trek are fighting the Borg, they adapt. And so does the dense thing that's hiding from you in your writing will adapt to whatever you're doing. Sometimes it's better to type. Sometimes it's better to do this. Sometimes, I mean, there's all these sorts of things. So what I always tell them too is you've got to be very, very flexible to get that stuff, that slurry out of your head in whatever way you can.
All right, let's go down to Candy.
Oh, me? Oh, well.
Yeah, favorite piece of advice you give to a baby writer.
Baby writer. Let me see, baby writer. Let me see. Well, there's actually two. One is from Joe Haldeman, who told me to get all your money up front. That's the mercenary part, which cracks me up. But it did come in handy when they said, well, what about this? And yeah, all of it up front. I'm not going to worry about earning out. I'm done. The other one is basically, and I tell them, please respect your characters, listen to your characters. Your characters are what carry people through the story. Yeah, I know you want to talk about how important this gun is or this city that you're describing and all that stuff, but without the character, without the reader hooking up with the character and understanding who the character is right away and wanting to make this journey with that character, without investing right there and being clear and charming and engaging and what I used to call the James Cagney factor, which turned into the Tony Stark factor. What am I? I'm in the desert, I'm in a Humvee, and there's a guy with a cocktail, and he's kind of glib. Okay, but he's smart and he's funny. Okay, well, he continues to go there. It doesn't matter where, you could watch him fold socks. It doesn't matter now. You're vested, and he's funny, and you just want to see what he does next. That, to me, is the biggest nut, is to really, really invest in all your characters. Make them interesting, make them likable. Do not lose them through your journey, because a lot of people will go off and you're like, why am I paying attention to this? Why did you go over here? Because that character is the character of the person who is reading. You're going through this with them. So please stay focused on your characters and spend the time with them. And be a Sherlock Holmes. Look at everything around you. Don't plug and play. And it's like that scene from this book, or it's from that moment from that book. No, we've all seen it. We already know that. So that's where I send them at first.
All right. Dan, favorite piece of advice for a baby writer?
So a lot of times you bring in a character because you need somebody else at the table to communicate to or whatever. There was a great piece of advice that was, treat all your secondary characters as if they think the story's about them, okay? And all you need to do, write that one down, and whenever you're working on your secondary character, read that and say, this is all about this guy, and this person shows up from this person's POV, point of view. It's not all about that person. It's about what their role in it is. In other words, make them three-dimensional, give them more than just showing up at the table. So that's a neat, and you go to that well all the time. Every time you're bringing on your secondary character.
I love cutaway guys.
The first one is, and this, a lot of people aren't going to like this, but hear me out. Outline your story. Here's why. Let me give you a real quick example.
Yes.
I put this on my blog the other day, and one of the first comments was, I don't like to outline because, and she gave me all the 8 million reasons. First thing I always like to say is, what we call somebody with 10 stories finished and no stories, 10 stories started and no stories finished? We don't call them a published author. If you have an outline, you're much more likely to finish the story. And here's what I mean by an outline. Here's Romeo and Juliet. Boy and girl want to get together. Mom and dad don't want them to get together. They get together anyway. Everybody dies. That's your outline. So where are we going? Do they live happily ever, or do they die? Do they get together or do they not? A few basic points so that you, through the whole book, will get to where you're supposed to go, which is not only the end, but a satisfying conclusion to a story that we were interested in. So that's outlining. But what the blog comment was, she goes, outlining is like diagramming sentences and calculus. I'm like, yeah, you're right. It's not that. It's simply you laying out your little path. And guess what? If you get to boy and girl want to get together, the parents don't want them to, they decide to anyway, and everybody lives happily ever after, it's your book. You're allowed to do that, okay? So as you go along, you have an ending. And if you come up with a better ending, you go with the better ending. You're allowed to choose it. So an outline doesn't lock you in. It channels your creativity. The last one I'm going to say is this. Chris Rock had a great comment. I love comedians, okay? Because they have to kind of cut through all the BS to get to the universal truth of something, or you don't laugh at it and they're out of a job. Chris Rock said, he was on some TV show, some interview show, and he said, talking about politics and this and that is what's going to make the headline and get people interested in going to the show. What makes the show successful is the personal stuff, the relationships. Why? He goes, because the more personal, the more universal. I may never have lost my dog, but by golly, if you're talking about how you lost yours, I'm going to feel that pain. If you're talking about how you broke up with your girlfriend in 8th grade, or how awkward it was to try to get that first kiss, We've all been, even if we never got a first kiss in our lives, we still understand the awkwardness of an uncomfortable moment. Dropping your tray in the cafeteria and everybody looking at you. Everybody gets that. But for you, it was totally personal. And guess what, introvert authors? That's the last thing you want to put on the page is opening your own soul and saying, I dropped my tray and everybody looked at me, and 40 years later, I still remember how I still blush. Nobody cares about that, but everybody relates. You have to be brave. Great writing isn't safe. You got to open up those doors and throw yourself out there. You got to be naked on the stage, willing to be laughed at and willing to come back again tomorrow and do it again.
All right.
You don't have to go that route, but you're going to enjoy it a lot more if you do, because nothing risked, no risk, no reward. And the rewards are so huge when some person you don't even know writes you and said, I spent $5 on your book and I loved it. I missed my bus stop. I couldn't stop reading it. That's worth $5.
Mm-hmm. The best fan mail I ever got was someone who emailed me out of the blue and said, your book saved my marriage.
Can't argue with that.
That was earth-shattering.
Yeah. And you get those things. To be unpublished is to be unread, is to not exist. But once you put it out there, people will connect with it.
All right. Jose, favorite piece of advice for a baby writer?
Let me tell you, being on this panel is an exercise in changing my answer 5 times. As okay, that's what I was going to say.
No cheating off the smart kids.
So what I'm going to say is embrace the great YMMV, the great your mileage may vary. If at the end of the day you are producing words, if you're producing stories, if you're getting to the end, if you're happy with what you're doing, then you're doing it right. Don't try to be like anybody else. Just, you know, everybody's path is different. Everybody's technique is different.
Yeah, we are study indifferent. He's a plotter, I'm a pantser, and we don't try to make each other the way that we are, and we take the good from each other all the time. And so it's, you know, we are a study in contradiction. So yeah, whatever works.
But it works, that's the key.
All right.
Whatever works, it works.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we have a question from the audience. Paula wants to know, what are some good places to look for online critique groups looking to avoid pitfalling into a mutual admiration society? So Paula, what do you write? You can go ahead and unmute and sound off. I saw you were in here.
At this point, I don't have anything really complete.
Paula, here's what I
didn't ask what you'd finished. I asked what you wrote.
What type of genres interest you?
Science fiction.
Here's what I would suggest for you. Drop the word online critique group, that phrase, into your favorite search engine. You'll get 5 or 6, and then just try before you buy. Most of them have a way for you to look. They'll have something that explains how it works. You check it out, and if it's free, and I was in one for years, it was free. So what's the harm if you join a free one and you hate it, you quit and find another one? There were, I actually was in 2, and one I never went to at all. And then if you have anybody who any of your friends or circle of influence that writes, ask them if they know of a recommendation for that, or if any of their friends have. And the most popular ones that will come up on your search engine, the reason I suggested that, they're popular for a reason, because they're not full of bullies and trolls and things. But like I said, once you get into it, you're smart enough to figure out who's giving you, who's want to tell you how important they are or how smart they are, and who's actually putting stuff out. I found a New York Times bestselling author who was currently publishing New York Times bestselling books in the critique group I was in. That was a great person to connect with. So there's all kinds of talent levels out there, and aspire to you'll find the people who do science fiction and stuff in those groups.
I'm going to drop one into the chat. This was a very good one. It was founded by, I think, Cece Finley and Elizabeth Bear. It's the Online Writers Workshop for science fiction, fantasy, and horror. And they do have a free trial, and then I think it's like $30 a year. It's very good.
That's nominal.
It is
That's
very
nominal.
good.
What you'll learn, you're going to make more than $30 worth of knowledge back, you know?
Absolutely.
And do me a huge favor when you're getting all this input as you go. Don't fall into the endless rewrite yourself. Be a good filter, and you know what's good and what's bad, because I know way too many people that have been rewriting the same thing over and over and over to make other people happy. Don't.
Yeah.
cherry pick the ideas and go forward, because you'll never get done. It's horrible to see people that fall into that endless, you know.
Yeah, definitely.
You'll see 'em, they're out
I
there.
agree with you completely, Ken. That
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
At
you
some
gotta
point,
keep
the
moving
changes are just
forward.
making it different. They're not making it better. Publish
Right.
it and move on to the
see
next
what they
story
say
because you have
and
more than one good story in you.
Absolutely.
All right. Okay, now we are coming up on 2, so I'm going to wrap and then, ask my last question, get our panelists to tell us, where they can be found online, and then if we want to keep chatting, we can keep chatting. So we'll start with Jose. Where are you online? And then tell us the advice you wish you have learned, but you wish you'd been given early on.
Put me on the spot there.
Yep.
I am most active on Twitter, where my handle is labyrinthrat. So good luck spelling that. It's an entrance
It's
exam.
a test,
Yes,
right there.
yes. Can you follow me? I'm also on Facebook, facebook.com/labyrinthrat, and my website is labyrinthrat.com. The advice that I wish I'd been given
Sooner.
sooner. Yeah, I'm not sure I have a ready answer to that. I feel like I've been saying some fairly similar stuff on and off throughout. I'll tell you what, actually. You have to care about what you're writing. You have to find the thing that matters to you in it, your reason for loving this story and for loving these people. Especially the newer you are, that passion can create a lot of space for forgiveness for a lot of technical imperfections or newness. So figure out why you care and make sure that that's always at the heart, not what it looks like on the outside or what genre, but why do you need to tell this story?
All right. Elle, where can we find you, and advice you wish you'd gotten sooner?
Okay, you can find me on ellire.com. You can find my work. Oh, you can also find me on Twitter as ellire. You can also find me on Facebook. You can find my work on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, Target, and hopefully soon in actual bookstores. As far as advice, I wish I'd gotten sooner. I'm going to go back to the whole you get your speaking skills and start practicing. When we were talking about getting a critique group, I actually generally advise people to try for those in-person critique groups, just because that's a good practice zone for being able to talk to other writers about your work and not stumbling over yourself as you're talking about your work, because we all seem to get tongue-tied when someone says, "What's your book about?" And you're like, "I write words." Yes, words. They're good words. There's lots of them and they're all on pages. So, obviously not much is going on in person at all right now if we can avoid it. But when the time comes, if you can find a good local in-person group, I would say try that too. So I wish somebody had told me about that sooner.
Go to your library.
Okay.
Yeah, library, good place to start.
Yeah, can I cut in? and
Especially
just
our local
say-
libraries, yeah. The Winter
Yeah, I
Park
was,
Library offers some really good writer stuff.
Also, if you are on Meetup, let me just add that there are writers groups on Meetup.
Okay.
It's meetup.com, and you can check that.
All right, Dan, where can we find you online, and what advice do you wish you had been given sooner that that you had to learn on your own or that you learned later?
I'll tell you that when you're starting out, you're looking up at the task in front of you and you think that's the mountain, you're climbing a mountain. And then however many months later or years later, whatever, you're way up there and you look up and you see that wasn't the mountain, that was the easy part. This is the hard part. Writing the story isn't the hard part. That's fun. We enjoy doing that. It's the marketing. It's all the other stuff that makes it not fun. It's part of it, depending on what your goal is. If you want it to be a business, if you just want it to hobby, that's great. But even as a hobby, you have to put out, work occasionally to be appreciated, for people to appreciate it. But the beauty of that is your muscles are bigger by that point. So when you see the big mountain in front of you, you can remember that there was a big mountain when you started. You got this far, so you can get the rest of the way if you'll persevere. Perseverance, biggest thing. Don't give up. Stay after it. Learn, adapt, all those types of things. But don't give up. And where you can find me is, like I said, drop my name in your favorite search engine. I'm everywhere. But Amazon.com, Dan Alatorre is what I write under.
Okay. I have a T-shirt that says, "I didn't come this far to come this far."
Nobody aspires to middle management. Plow your way.
Well, where can we find you, and advice you wish you had been given sooner?
I mean, the good news is that my name is bizarre and unusual. So if you type it into almost anything, you can find my Twitter and my website. And if it's not in Norwegian, that's me. So that's good to know. If you can understand it and read it, you're like, okay, that's probably Will related. So good. Yeah, I'm on Twitter and Facebook and all the usual haunts where I probably shouldn't be. The advice I wish I had gotten was embrace as long as you can the sense of experimentation and fun and tinkering. That's, that you have when you first start writing, that I think you should be improving and you should be very, very honest with yourself. But man, the more that you try to be like other people and the more that you read all those horrifying writing books, man, I almost wish I had just experimented. Does it work? Does it not work? Let's go. And then you do that with a critique group. You do that with friends. You do that with whomever you can get to read your stuff, and you just have to experiment. It really boils down to, does this, like being an eye doctor, is this one better or is this one better? Is this one better? Is this one better?
One or two?
Yeah.
I was always like, I can't tell. They look the same.
Yeah.
All right, and Kenny, you get to wrap us up.
Oh,
Where do
I'm
we
so
find you,
sorry.
and what's the best
Can I
advice? What's the advice you
apologize
wish you'd been
now?
given?
Actually, it came from Robert Aspirin. We're all, as you sit and write and do your creative things at the house and all stuff, you forget about how you're affecting everybody out there once the book or the thing that you've done is out there. And it was interesting because you wind up being a little bit socially retarded because you're kind of like a tree growing in on itself. And then when you get out with people, you panic, you're just like, and Bob was really good. He said, look, this is a lot of things that authors don't remember, is to be gracious, be friendly, be gracious. Somebody spent $20 for your book or $9 for your comic book or whatever. And they come up and they're like, hey, I really enjoyed this, thank you. And you don't quite know how to react because you're not confronted every day by people going, hey, I really like that, thank you so much. And you got to learn to say, well, thank you, and shake their hands, sign their book, and just give back. But learn how to do that because it is a skill.
Yeah.
It's a skill that we don't have that is very human. But if you don't flex that muscle every day, you tend to react the wrong way. Or so yeah, Bob's advice was just like, be gracious, take your time, and thank them for letting you do what you do. It's important. It's very important. So thank you, Bob, wherever you are.
I like our advice. It's a good way to end the panel.
Yeah, you're going to type
where can we find you?
On television or at the theater that hopefully they'll let us go back into.
Okay.
Of course, Fata Morgana, that's on Amazon and, all other book outlets. And Mr. Boyette and I are playing around with possibly doing another. But, right now the new TV series season is starting and some new movies are starting. So I'm just waiting on the phone calls. So I'm kind of enjoying the quiet right now. I'm playing with my trains.
Okay, well, thank you to our panelists and thank you to the audience and thank you to Necronomicon for having us all.
Yeah.
Let me jump in real quick and say this is our last panel. However, the con suite is going to be open for the rest of the night. I kicked people out at 1:30 last night because I wanted to go to bed. But yeah, so go over there. We are going to have a Dead Dog wrap-up party from 5 to 7. Bring your Chinese food. We'll have a party. I completely want to thank everybody that has zoomed in, the great writers, the great artists, and the great fans. We hope we see you live next year. And be sure to go over and buy your t-shirt. All the money goes to our charity. And we love you guys and stay safe and we'll see you next year.
Dad, is there a way to donate without giving without buying something?
Yes, if you follow the link on our website, there is a donate button for Kids and Canines. Thank you for that question.
Deb, can you throw that into the chat since we're not closing quite yet?
Okay, yep, I will, and I will get that in, and then we'll see you guys on the con suite, hopefully.
And
All
also,
right.
if you have questions that we didn't get to, or you didn't want to ask so publicly, message me, or I'll be in the panel discussion channel as well, or on Discord. I'm always happy to answer questions, so.
Does
Definitely.
the con suite Zoom, is it a Zoom room or is it the discussion panel?
No,
It's
it's,
a Zoom
The
room?
dead dog's in the Zoom room.
It's
I'm
just a
not
Zoom.
100% sure.
it's just
Okay.
open in my living room, and anybody can come and go as they please, and it's on Discord, and it's also on our website. It's Con Suite 3.
Yeah, it should be in the schedule. You should have a link to the con suite.
Okay, cool.
Okay,
Okay,
thank you.
and I will get that for you.
Yay. I'm going to go move railroad ties. I mean, real railroad ties. And it's going to be hot. So I will see you all later.
I
Are you
take
guys
care.
coming back to Dead Dog?
I might. I'll be awful filthy.
We don't care. We can't smell you from here.
Oh, not that kind of filthy. I mean, dirty filthy.
We do not have
Oh.
smell-o-vision.
I will see you later. I have things to do.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, guys.
Going now. Goodbye.
Thank you for the good advice, everybody. I hope to make it where you are and put some stuff out this year.
Do it.
Good luck.
Thanks. Thanks. Good advice. Good day.
Does anybody know if the Discord is going to stay as a resource, or is it turning into a pumpkin after the end of the con?
It'll be staying up.
Okay.
Discord is,
Hey, Elizabeth, I'll
Deb,
ask you a
you
quick
muted.
question.
Deb, you muted.
If somebody had a question, and a lot of times with me, I don't think of it during the presentation. I think of it 10 minutes later after the presentation's over. If somebody who was watching had a question, how can they get their question to the group or whatever?
They could put it into panel discussions over in Discord. Or,
And
you know,
are
bring it
people
up in the
looking at
con
those
suite
things?
and tag any of us. It's an @ and whatever our username is on Discord. Or
you
they
can
can
also
email it to
post-
us directly.
yeah, or you can post it on our Facebook,
Mhm.
because most everybody reads that. Hopefully it won't get lost in the chat, but try that one.
Well, if anybody else any questions, this would be your chance. Let's see what the chat button says.
Nothing
Lot
in
of links.
chat. I think we're pretty much done.
Hey, see you all over in the con suite.
See you in the con suite.
Bye,
Yeah, we're all
guys.
about-
Thanks again.
All right. Well, it was
Okay,
great
let's
seeing
go ahead and
everybody.
shut
Thanks
it
again.
down. Bye.
I'm just gonna leave meeting.